This is TWiT.
You, I note, are not in Las Vegas along with the rest of the world.
No, it's because I value my time and my sanity.
They say attendance is way down too. Like it's
last year was 130,000. Not that many this year.
Yeah,
I don't know why anyone goes to this thing.
I don't either, to be honest.
There, as a tech writer, journalist, whatever you want to call me, there's certain times of the year I cannot stand, and the Black Friday, all the holiday sale, it's just everyone selling crap, and then this week it's just like, like I referenced in the notes, like the 4K hummingbird feeder. It's like, guys, could we not focus on the stupid for 2 seconds? Can we just pretend there isn't all this like someone who just went to CS and was like, all right, I wasted all my time, but I found these three things that are totally
they were awesome.
That would be fine. But you know what? I can do that from here. So
in fact, that's what I did. I looked, there's some nice laptops. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually a little surprised by some of that in a good way, I should say.
All the chip makers made announcements too.
Yep.
Of course, the story this year is AI and robots.
Yay. Yeah, so now that we can move past agenic finally, and we're just going to go to full humanoid robots. So they're going to walk around your house cleaning up and stuff. It's just like, guys.
So we're going to, next show, we're going to talk about, we got Jason Heiner. He's going to be on the phone from the airport talking about the AI story at CES. And then Sunday on TWiT, we've got Father Robert, we've got Jason Heiner, and we've got Jennifer Pattison Tui. Let me move myself over to the left so it doesn't confuse people. Those three are all in Vegas right now, those poor folks.
Yeah.
Wow.
Jennifer's covering home automation. Robert, looks for all the interesting gadgets, and Jason he's by the way, no longer at ZDNet. He now writes for an AI forward newsletter.
Really?
He's the editor-in-chief there. So he's there to cover AI. So we've got a lot of CES coverage, but I'm counting on you guys. Oh, Paul, you're not in the middle. All right, sorry. Let me move everybody around. There we go. I'm counting on you guys to fill us in on the PC story there. Yeah. Microsoft doesn't go anymore. Is Intel there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, they did a big presentation actually. So just to kind of put this in perspective, I guess, typically these companies, Intel, AMD, and also, Qualcomm on and off, they're on their own thing, but typically announce new processors at IFA in Berlin in the fall, right, in September, early September. And none of them did, So everyone talks about how Snapdragon is on kind of the slow boil schedule, whatever. And yeah, maybe, I don't know. I can see that. But
I think
Intel and
Qualcomm's
AMD
just learning to make processors at this speed. We make a new processor every year thing. That's not by nature. That's a decision.
It may not be necessary. So I would say, it's hard to say this now, or think about this, but about a year and a half ago, when in the wake of the Copilot Plus PC stuff with first gen Snapdragon, AMD and Intel both announced new gen at the time, Lunar Lake and Zen 5 chipsets, which both were big improvements in some ways over their predecessors, right? The AMD was a dramatic improvement. So this year, or this CES, AMD's next gen, so instead of AI 300 series, AI 400 series, still Zen 5, is what I would call a minor bump. The Intel stuff, performance-wise, graphics and processor, and actually NPU sort of, but graphics and CPU are dramatically better. And this was the one when Richard was here. I was hoping to get like a prototype of one of these Panther Lake laptops, and the first one I got was just like the previous gen, same old. And I was like, oh. But then I don't know if you were here when it happened, but eventually I did get one. So for the past,
I think I'd left. But
okay, right around So almost a month now, I've been using this Panther Lake laptop, which I have to say is pretty fantastic. Other than what I'm going to call the standard Intel reliability issues, right? But as far as like performance and possibly efficiency, there's still some things I need to figure out. It's actually a big deal.
Is Panther Lake the successor to Lunar Lake?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I have that Lunar Lake ThinkPad X1 Carbon.
Yeah, the Aura edition. Yep. And for that kind of stuff, it's great, right? Yeah. So the thing this is now a couple of years old. In fact, it was starting with Meteor Lake, which I have to think back is 2+ years ago now. I can't remember. Almost 3 years. Was the first, AMD was doing this too, but at the time, it was the first time you could get a laptop and actually play AAA games pretty well on like a standard, productivity laptop. And Lunar Lake and Zen 5 made that much better, especially Zen 5. And now with Panther Lake and second gen Zen 5, which is AI 400.
I was listening to Richard when I bought the laptop because I got the impression that AMD on a laptop is not yet as good as Intel. But that's not your experience? I'm not gaming on
it's
this
more reliable to me.
Intel.
Reliable.
Or
no,
AMD.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
It's funny you say that because I built those two machines, one of which I did on the show, and one I did as an Intel machine, and one as an AMD machine.
Yeah. Yep.
Guess which one isn't working right now?
I don't have to guess.
Yeah. Which one? I don't know. AMD?
Yeah. No, the Intel.
No, the Intel's down, and I'm not sure why.
Yeah, I love this. Maybe I misunderstood, but I thought AMD for desktop. I have the Strix Halo desktop, and Intel for laptop only because of power, and because I'm using Linux. I really didn't want to go with Snapdragon yet.
They can both be fine. They're never going to be as efficient or quiet or reliable as like Snapdragon, but a lot of this is on the PC maker, right? Their ability to, through firmware, make up for what of the issues are with the chips and everything. Like Lenovo is the biggest PC maker in the world. They do a great job with that stuff. HP tends to do a really good job too.
We learned that a couple of years ago, how much the OEMs do to make up for.
And we learned that because Microsoft wouldn't do it. Yeah. And their products were terrible. Weird.
They didn't. They had never made a computer before. They didn't know.
Right, and it showed
what the process
that.
was.
Yeah. It's like we've been dictating what these things should be for years. We got this. Yeah, no, you don't.
No,
but
you have no idea how much work the OEMs put in to make this stuff good. I have to say the X1 now, and maybe it's a Linux thing. I don't know, but when I open the lid, turns on like that.
Yeah, that's what you're looking for.
In every respect, it's as good as a MacBook, and really, that's what I was looking for. Which was, I'm kind of thinking I want to go non-proprietary with all of my systems now, and.
So we're going to
Windows and Mac. I think they're converging on this world. You know what? Okay, here I'll run this by you, Paul. I don't want to interrupt.
This is a big thing for me right now. But go ahead. Yeah, no, go ahead.
Honestly, the kernel, the stuff that's doing the work, I'm sure the Mach kernel on Apple, the Windows kernel on Windows, and the Linux kernel are roughly capable, equally capable.
I think that's fair.
So really what you're looking at is the customization on top of that. That's what distinguishes one from another.
Yeah,
the hardware, of course.
Hardware, driver, compatibility. It's going to be just kind of fit
and the user interface. All of that's dictated.
Yes.
And so Microsoft has its point of view about that. And when you choose a Windows machine, you're choosing Microsoft's point of view.
Microsoft's point of view is a blender.
I'm not making any aspersions yet,
right?
But I'm merely saying that Apple also has its very dogmatic point of view about what that experience should be. And both of them of late, and we were talking about this yesterday on Security Now, as is Google with Android, are really pushing code signing, locking this stuff down. Yeah. And I understand for security reasons and for naive users, it's probably a good thing.
Well, but I also when your house is on fire, what you worry about is insulation and
you lock the doors, right?
Yeah, it's just your perspective. Like when Linux had the benefit of that's 30 years ago, by the way, but coming around in a world where Windows was taking over the world and was hugely unreliable, right? And so they had something to shoot for there, right? Unix levels of not just functionality, but also performance, reliability, security, etc.
But I'm going to even stipulate that, roughly speaking, Mac, Windows, and Linux are, roughly speaking, performance-wise equivalent. Let's assume that. There are going to be pros and cons in all of those.
I would actually argue that
within an order of magnitude,
but yeah, okay, yes, okay, fair.
To me, the biggest difference, I've always said this: you choose a laptop based on your keyboard and screen. It's the UI. It's the thing that you're interacting with is what matters to you. Presuming that the underlying stuff is performance.
It's also apps, right? Like, if you think back 20 years, right? So Mac OS 10's out. Apple's doing great stuff with. Sorry, I just heard the alarm, but. Apple's doing great stuff.
On fire. Don't worry. Just lock the doors.
It's an earthquake. It's fine. Apple was doing great technical work with Mac OS 10,
Right.
But they had trouble getting app developers. Remember, Adobe was a big holdout for a while to get their apps over. So the app gap was kind of a big problem. So I think with the advent of web apps,
you have to consider that. Yeah.
This says, well, I think it's less of an issue now than it's ever been, right?
I think the differences on all three are evening out as time goes by.
I think a lot of this is just inertia. It's what people are used to.
I'm choosing an operating system that I decide. And that's the beauty of Linux, is because it's anything you want, basically, because there's so many people using it, and it's everybody gets it. So I want an operating system that no company's made a decision about how I use it. I get to make that decision. So now puts the onus on the user. So a lot of people, it's not appropriate. But I prefer this.
I don't remember who I was telling this over the holidays, but if you think back like to the mid 1990s again, Brian Livingston is writing his Windows Secrets books. And back then there were secrets, in the sense that mainstream users, there were things we just didn't know.
Right.
But as you move forward 10, 15 years, 20 years, whatever. There's no more secrets. There's no more secrets, right? We have the internet, everything's out there. And so for a while it becomes like, well, here's the correct way, if you will, to configure things, right? And if you just move forward to today, I find myself more and more, and this is something I've noticed in the books because I kind of did this in stages. It's like, here's how you reverse the crap that Microsoft did that is so anti-consumer and anti-user that it's become a problem. And so you're basically de-insurtifying it. And that's become like the focus. It's like, how do I make this thing behave well for me?
Yeah.
It's a different focus, and the only problem I have with Linux at all, literally, is just that it's just not enough of and it just works experience for most people. Like it's good for, like, if I wouldn't put my wife or my brother or a normal mainstream user on Linux, just because there would be too many questions. There'd be too many, like maybe workflows or apps they're used to that aren't there. Maybe it's like a seamless cloud sync, that you might get with iCloud or OneDrive or whatever. There's just some rough edges, but it's dramatically better than it used to be. And as far as like reliable and stuff, I put Elementary OS, the latest version, on some HP laptop, and it has that experience you're talking about. Where you open the lid, it actually comes on. I'm like, that's fascinating because this does not work with Windows. So that happens. But yeah, Leo and I at some point had kind of, we both had come to this, like in the end, I feel like open wins, when it comes to computing platforms.
It's a cycle. You start with a closed system first where you control all the variables until you get it to a working state. Mm-hmm. And then you can create a more open system with multiple vendors to drive down prices and give you more choice. But the open platform has to be relatively stable. So the walled garden always comes out with the new stuff first, and it works.
Because it's way easier if you control everything.
If you control all the variables.
If you just look at some of the cross-platform stuff that even Microsoft is struggling to get done that Apple did many years ago, even with Android, which is basically open source, it's hard. It takes years to get that stuff going. And then you can't get it going at all with an iPhone because Apple locks that down, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, this is like, in some ways, is a very enthusiast-centric conversation in a way, because I think for most mainstream users,
the average consumer does not care. They just want to do their thing.
And when you look at even people are like Apple fans, they're like I have an iPhone, I have an Apple Watch, I get an iPad, like, do you have a Mac? You're like, there's a stigma associated with these computers that are basically for work, because everything fun now happens on this fun device that you have,
Yeah.
And for me, I'm actually really into productivity and efficiency and all that. So for me, taking the onus off Windows, in my case, to be the center of everything was actually kind of a good thing, because it, or theoretically at least, allows it to focus on that stuff, the stuff that matters to me, or, I'm trying to get something done, and then, of course, Microsoft can't help themselves, so they've been ruining it. But, that's sort of the idea.
Well, certainly our conversations between the Snapdragon machines and the AMD and Intel machines is just the layers of cruft that are in the older flavor of Windows. The Windows on ARM just stripped away literally a generation worth of cruft. And so, of course, the open the screen and it just starts up. It makes a huge difference.
I still, to this moment, it's over here. When I came home from Mexico,
Microsoft is known this the whole time. This is what 10 had been trying to get us to
this is what RT was. This was, we see that these things are more reliable. They're more efficient. They have these instant on experiences. They have instant on connectivity experiences, which, on the PC was, not so common. And we need to get this thing to be more of a device type system. Yeah. And look, you can take something big and complicated and chop away at it, or you can take something brand new and kind of build it up. There's different ways to do this, but
the power of iOS.
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, though, they had to chop away to get to iOS.
iOS had nothing, and then it had to be built.
But now, when Apple builds a new Apple TV OS or this HomePod OS, or whatever they're going to call it, or whatever it is, they build from iOS up. Like you have this. Well, they do. I mean, that's how they do it. They have this componentized system, and we'll build the pieces we need for this special purpose device.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this little highlight from a much better show, and longer too, called Windows Weekly. The whole link to the show is right below me. And of course, we stream live right here every Wednesday. You can watch us do our thing or download it here or in your favorite podcast player. Best thing to do? What do they say? Like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.